and welcome to Combat Thoughts. I'm Robbie.
I'm Lee.
And I'm Alex.
We're going to take a deeper look at culture and philosophy behind martial arts. So we're doing judging systems in MMA. All right, so like we were saying before, we're staying away from quality of judging. Let's just assume all the judging's perfect, because we know it's not, and I don't want anyone to get on rants about shitty decisions in MMA or
Shout
stuff like that. Yes, anyway. So, I mean, I think there's a few obvious ones to distinguish between. I mean, there's the fact that UFC does it on a 10-point must system versus ONE and Pride doing it on the fight as a whole. Yeah, who wants to start?
Yeah, so my happiness when you said you wanted to do this pod was about discussing if you think the 10-point must system is the best way to score MMA. So I know everybody, like UFC, Bellator use 10-point must, but it was made for boxing. And actually Pride had a pretty good way of scoring the fight where you score it. And the round structure was different, so okay, take that into account. But it was basically at the end of the fight, who's done the best job? And everybody kind of moaned and complained about at the end of the fight being like, oh, it's skewed heavily by the end of the fight. But if that was a fight in the real world, the person who's coming out on top at the end of the fight is going to win. You look at the way Anderson Silva used to fight back in the day. He'd get 3 rounds up. The Damian Maia fight, he'd get 3 rounds up and then stop. And he was like, I won the fight now, and I'll just switch off. So I just wanted to get your opinion on if you think 10-point must is the best way, or should we switch it and do Pride?
Are you a Nate Diaz fan? If this was in the street, this is how it would go.
No, I'm not like that, like much of a hardcore where I'm like, oh, it's life and death, and if this was a medieval battle and all this. But I think there is something about finishing well rather than just racking up 3 rounds.
Also, why 10? Why does it have to be 10? Like, why do we choose why can't it be 5-point system where it's like 5 and 4? Like,
I think it's
10?
More significant. Well, this is the thing, it's inherited from boxing, and it's more significant in boxing when you have like 12-round fights where there could be a differential of 1 or 2 points, and then you throw in the fouls and stuff. When you've only got a maximum of 3 rounds, and you could maybe dock a point for a foul, because after you dock 2 points, you're basically disqualifying the guy normally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, having 10 points is a bit pointless. It's a bit stupid in a fight like that. So yeah, it's simply because it's inherited. I mean, I think you probably know the answer is no. 10 points must is a stupid way to judge a fight, to be honest. Yeah, it's inherited from boxing to make it easy for people transitioning over to understand the sport. But I think it would make it... I think there are easier ways to get people to understand the sport, really, than just copying something that's already happened. I think the issue with the 10-point must system is... It's not actually in the fact that it makes fights apparently boring towards the end. I think it's actually quite rare that people coast. I understand how that could be a problem. If you've won 2 rounds very convincingly, you might take the last round off and play it very, very safe.
Yeah, you see a lot of people just avoiding the fight in the last round.
You know what? I don't think you do see a lot. I think you see some here and there, but actually in terms of the amount of fight quality affected, I don't think it's huge. What I think is a bigger problem is where, let's say, someone has won 2 rounds and edged them, right? They got a few extra punches in, and then in the last round, the other guy like drops the person, gets on top in mount, starts pounding on them, but doesn't finish. I can't remember who this was against, but this happened with Fabricio Verdum, and Dana complained. He was like, why would you just get on top of him and lie on him? But at that point aside, he absolutely crushed it in the final round but lost the first 2. And for a casual guy coming in to watch the fight, I think the trouble is that they come in, they go, well, that guy bashed his fucking face into the floor, clearly he won. But actually, if you're judging it round on round, each individual point, yeah, it can be quite... it can come out with some slightly surprising results if you weren't aware that that was a 10-point must system about who wins the fight.
I think that's because you're taking each round as like a silo on its own. So it's not actually a fight. You're scoring 3 fights. It's the fight in round 1, the fight in round 2, and the fight in round 3. And there's no waiting for how much more you do. So you have the, aggression, octagon control, and all that around the rules.
I believe it's damage is the main priority.
Damage is the big one. But like you said, you can beat the absolute shit out of somebody in the first round. And then if they just get 2 takedowns and hold you down for the next 2 rounds, they've won. It does kind of heavily skew it away. Now, I think the pride approach is good for kind of bringing it back to that. But then I also think there's something to be done around, and again, we said we're not getting into the judging, but around having more judging. So I recently listened to a podcast where they were saying about having 5 judges in the 10-point must system, and you remove the top and bottom one. So like whoever's the furthest away from either side just gets discounted. So you get more of an average score of the fight. And it actually statistically should give you a better score to like the mean.
Oh, yeah. I'm more than happy to talk about that. I just don't want to get into the area of, oh, this judge is rubbish and that one was a fucking robbery. But that's perfect, yeah.
Yeah, I think, one definitely has taken it from pride, where they're judging on a whole fight. And it's, but the question is whether or not, are we trying to looking at it from, are we trying to see a fight from a sport perspective or from a fight perspective? And it's tricky for me. Like I side with the pride way of doing it. I side with the fact that you look at the entirety of the fight. But at the same time, I sort of understand the reasoning for having them separately in silos, because then it's more like a sport in a way. It's more like that's how Olympics are scored as well, is based on, individual rounds. And it seems more sporty to me in that respect. I don't know if you agree.
What is that noise in the background?
Sorry, I think that was my chair.
Okay. Never mind. I mean, I don't know. I do take what you're saying about like working out what it is we're trying to do, but I don't think shoehorning this like idea of sportiness into MMA is actually very good or very practical. I think what we should probably be focusing on is allowing clear decisions, both for the judges, so they can actually make an informed choice about who's won, but also just making it spectator friendly, because if you want to grow the sport, you need people to watch it and understand and know what's going on and not be upset about when one person wins when they're surprised that it's not the other guy. That's the sort of stuff we need to be focusing on and making it enticing for people to watch. And I think the 10-point must system kind of adds this layer of sportiness that makes it kind of opaque for people watching it. It makes it very unclear about who's winning a fight at any given time. I can't, because a lot of the time, imagine dropping into the fight halfway through, I would watch it and I wouldn't know who was winning, because if I haven't seen those first couple rounds, very hard to tell. Whereas if the fight's being judged as a whole and I drop in and I see that one guy is getting the breaks just beaten off of him, I'll be like, well, I think I fucking know who's going to win this either way. The question then becomes whether you need to upset the entire system, because judging the fight as a whole then seems very weird to me if you're having 3 rounds.
I mean, when you're having 5 rounds, I also feel like it could be quite difficult. Like, I mean, do we know how the judges do it? Do they still sort of, I guess they have their own little pads or whatever, and they write down their scores for each round or something?
Yep. So at the end of the round, they get 2 boxes, red corner, blue corner. At the end of the round, they write a winner and a loser in 10 and another score for the other person. They've recently changed it to be more generous with 10-8. The UFC and like the
rules. Are we talking about the UFC way? But I'm talking about the ONE FC way. I guess they still like
make notes. Yeah, it's like make notes, and then at the end of the fight, you pick somebody.
Because it would be for me, just thinking about it, it'd be quite difficult to remember.
Yeah, but that's the argument against pride.
Or something. Yeah,
that's the argument against the pride approach. Is the latter part of the fight is heavily skewed because that's the recent memory. So that right hook in the first minute and that exact same right hook in the last minute for the other guy probably stands out a bit more in the last minute because it's... And it all depends on how much action there is, obviously, but in a very tight fight, you probably are a bit more skewed towards the nearer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of seems weird, though, to judge it on the fight as a whole, especially if you're going to have those 3 different rounds. If you're going to judge the fight on a consistent whole, shouldn't you just have one long round and then just crack on with that?
Like Pride, right? Or,
no, just one round.
Oh, okay.
Right.
That's what I mean, just one round, because the Pride one long round was weird, but fine, whatever. I guess it's not actually that material to the fight in terms of who's gonna score it. Yeah, I mean, to be honest, it's kind of a weird system anyway. The whole thing's been inherited from boxing, but I think it's actually kind of not very spectator friendly in a lot of ways, and it kind of surprised me a lot of the time that it's just not ever been updated.
So I think you're actually wrong on it not being spectator friendly. I think it's a low barrier to entry for the wider public. So everybody who's into some sort of fight sports, even like the most casual of casuals, will have watched a few boxing fights. So they know it's 10-9 and they can come into an MMA fight and they can go. And it's probably the reason the UFC stole it from boxing is because they go, well, it's same, but a little bit different. But at the end of the round, you go, he won that one, 10. He won that one, 10. And like you can jump into it a bit more as a fan because you can actually have an opinion of the round and jump in because you know it's the boxing scoring. If you came in and said you're going to score the stand-up like a Thai fight and you're going to score the ground like a Ju-Jitsu match and then you're going to average your scores and then add them together and then create a number that gets... That is going to then... People are going to go, like, fuck am I going to watch this? It's confusing.
Of course, yeah. No, that would be a nightmare. But that's why I actually like the criteria for what they're judging it on, which is primarily damage. It is kind of disappointing that someone coming really close to a submission, if the person gets out of it, it really means fuck all if the other guy punches him in the face a few times. But you know what? I mean, it does actually tell you who's won. And it's just kind of an understanding of the sportsman involved, of the fighters, that if I do go for the strangle and they get out of it, it means nothing in the grand scheme of things.
So I was listening to Ben Askren this morning on Lex Friedman, and his critique of the Jiu-Jitsu scoring is near submissions don't get counted anywhere near as much as they should. There's no points for nearly submitting somebody. So he was like, you can win off a takedown. And it's the same kind of in MMA where you can nearly have a rear naked choke, and that's so not judged the same as a good right hook.
Yeah, but he didn't do it. Nearly doing something is not the same as doing it. I can't
right hook and dropping somebody and not finish them is exactly the same.
Yeah, but no, it's not the same. It'd be the same as throwing a right hook and it just missing. If you didn't do anything to the person, that's more like it. Because
so you're thinking of a choke then. So if you look at the armbar Vitor Belfort got on John Jones,
yeah, no,
damage to that arm.
Yeah, or Tony Ferguson heel hook.
Yes, that is more significant. If you, but then you ask, okay, yeah. So now that I'm saying,
I understand what you're saying, Robbie. Though I kind of understand what you're saying because it is to an extent, even if you are like if you're hooking someone and you hit them, there is actually more damage done than if you were trying. Yeah, but then we get down into what we're saying now, which is if it's a choke, then yeah, probably not. Really, you're not going to do any damage, but if it's a near submission and someone's elbow is out of place, then...
Well, to come back to Ben Askren, I've not listened to the podcast, so maybe you can inform me a little bit on it, but I don't think he's going to say that you can score points for nearly taking someone down.
No, so his argument was around the Eddie Bravo rules, and like you can hold out to the end, get to extra time, and then you get an armbar, and if you're great at armbars, you can beat everybody. And I get that point. So it's kind of somewhat relevant. I just think bringing that over into MMA is just because it's a choke and just because there's no damage, the aim of the fight is to end the fight. Ultimately, because you're having a fight. If a choke's nearly close, or a right hook sends you on chicken legs, it's, to me, parallel in terms of close to finishing the fight.
But so that's not what the fight's. That is not what the fight's being judged on, though. The fight is being judged on damage. If we want to judge it on who is closer to finishing the fight, that is a fair way to judge it. But it's not the same as what we're doing at the moment. But I am interested in that as an idea of judging it on who gets closer to finishing. That could be a legit way to do it.
And wouldn't it bring us to a point where we're promoting the right behaviours in terms of fight to win rather than fight to win 3 rounds and things like that?
Well, interesting you say that. You're aware of the fight to win BJJ promotion?
Yes, yeah.
Right. You know that they do a scoring system like that. If you get a sort of submission that's kind of there, you get a point. And I think if you get a submission that's really close, you get 2 or 3 points. I don't remember exactly how it works.
Yeah.
The idea being to generate a really spectator-friendly Ju-Jitsu match where they go, oh, that's close, blah, 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 right? You know, people are constantly going for submissions. The issue with it is, if I get your ankle and I go for it, and I'm not going to break it, right? But you know what? I get your ankle, I grit my teeth, I look at the judges, really I look like I'm putting a lot of effort into it and get a fucking point and then move on with my life. That's the issue you've got, is that it starts feigning this idea of people just going for shit that's not there.
Yeah.
And then if you're talking about, who's... then judging it by who's getting close to finishing the fight gets into this awkward territory with... And I'm trying to think back on Alexander Volkanovski versus Brian Ortega. If you were judging it on who was closer to finishing the fight, would you have given that to Brian Ortega?
No, but you have to put the damage as a comparative to finishing the fight. What I'm trying to say is, you need to
so you've got two criteria then.
Yes, you need to bring up the point that choke was really fucking close, and Ortega was nearly fucking finished. And the way the sport's judged, they're taken at a kind of hierarchy level, and I think there should be a way that submissions need to be brought up a bit in terms of nearly being finished and genuinely nearly being finished. And let's not get into how qualified the judges need to be to recognise that. But it's skewed more to, and I get it because of the rules, but it is skewed more towards striking.
Yeah, I mean that's something we've talked about before, right? That in general, that's just the way. Even the round systems and whatever, it's heavily skews towards striking anyway. If you end the round and you're in a dominant position, you get put up straight striking again. Yeah,
and you're right. It does encourage striking more. But I'll tell you what, I like that. One thing I do like about the current rules is that there is a clear primary criteria for who wins that round, and it's damage, right? I understand what you're saying, that bringing up the importance of submissions would be nice. I think there's 2 issues with it, though. Actually, go on, Alex. Just before I
was just thinking, because damage is a criteria, of course, that can also be interpreted in different ways. And now my question is the damage, if you do break someone's leg, although might be difficult to tell that in a fight, but I guess how do you see that, for example, with Dariush and the heel hook that he had on Ferguson, because that is damage, that is pure damage, but that's not going to get assessed probably by the judge because they're not going to know if that leg is broken or not. So I think it's still heavily skewed towards striking, the damage part.
It is. And I mean, the thing is, the judges can only judge what they can see.
Of course.
Right. It's going to be what you can see.
We can't have X-rays.
Yeah, you can't do X-rays, right? I get what you're saying. I think what we're talking about is damage that's apparent damage, if you want to be more specific, right? It's damage that is obvious to the judges when they're looking at it. I think The thing is, though, at least damage is the one clear winner and decider of a round at the moment. I think if you start bringing in two criterias, that makes it really tricky to judge, and also it starts muddying it quite a lot if someone's watching the fight about who's winning.
You are way more open to interpretation of what you value as a person.
Yeah, and actually, I would like the judging to be less based on kind of personal interpretation.
Yeah,
which is partly why I like. I mean, I like the clear damage thing. I like that that's an obvious point, and I like there's a clear hierarchy. You know, it's damage, then it's control, then it's I can't remember exactly what the criteria are.
I can tell you what the FC criterias are because I've got it in front of me.
Yeah,
go for ONE FC. So it's near knockout or submission. So actually, that works in ONE FC. Followed, so it's important criteria is if there is a near knockout or submission followed by damage done. The third criterion was striking combinations, ground control, generalship, and control superior position. Then takedowns and takedown defense were the fourth, and
when you start
the final.
Yeah, I mean, so what they're saying is it's who's closer to finishing the fight, who did more damage, who looked like they were doing better.
Yeah,
that's the level of things, right?
Their language is trying to bring both of them out, though. Their language looks to consciously try and bring out striking and grappling in the same phrase, which is I quite like. That's the point I was making.
I like it, but under those rules, again, who would have won the fight between Brian Ortega and Alexander Volkanovski?
Well, it would be. I guess then you've got the damage done, right? And it's,
no, because you've got to judge it on the primary criteria. After that, it's tiebreakers. That's what those...
No, but you'd still judge it as a round, so Volkanovski would win one round. Whereas then you have Ortega would win one round because of the submission. And then Volkanovski had 3 rounds of nearly finishing him. So
okay, but but under one's rules are not round by round.
It would be much
rules are the fight as a whole.
Yeah, so Ortega gets 1 point for the near submission.
No, fight as a whole.
No, but to kind of think of it analytically, he gets 1 point for nearly doing the submission, right? And then you go, well, Volkanovski nearly finished in round 4, nearly finished in round 5. So you're comparing the two same things, but he had 2 more occurrences of it than Ortega had 1.
Yeah, I mean that's fair, but I mean it's still kind of awkward if you get 1 near submission attempt and then you just take punches on the face. If you don't get wobbled and don't get dropped, but you get absolutely fucking nailed for even for 5 rounds, right? If you get 1 near guillotine choke and then you just get crushed for 5 rounds, but we're saying judge the fight as a whole and judge it primarily on who nearly finished it, that means that person who got absolutely crushed and will win the fight overall.
But then there surely has to be guidance of how many tier 2 categories make a tier 1. Like you can't, like you said, you pull a heel hook in round 1 and go, shit, I've won. I've nearly won. I nearly got a heel hook, and you just get beaten up for 4 rounds. There has to be a way to rationalize the other levels to equal that.
Yeah, it's not as if the knockout or near submission is like 100% of the weight, right? It'll be like, let's say, I don't know, 60%.
I don't know, isn't it? Because 70%. The whole point is that damage wins. You don't then go, damage wins, but that guy had like good octagon control for the whole thing.
Yeah, but then that percentage would be like what, like 10% of the fight or something.
You know how complicated complicated that ruling system becomes. I like simple rule systems, which makes it really accessible for anyone watching to pick up on it straight away. That's one thing I like.
So it's 10-point must system then for you. It's
absolutely
win or loser.
Not.
It's
absolutely
win or loser.
Absolutely not the 10-point must system, because that is just weird and difficult. And the 10-point must system ends up with stupid things like which was I talking to one of you guys about it, and they said that Colby won like 2 of 3. Yeah, 2 rounds out of 5.
No, it was me, yeah.
And it was you, right?
Yeah.
Colby like, if he had thrown a couple more punches in one of those rounds, could feasibly have actually won that fight.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
looking at the fight as a whole, there's absolutely no fucking chance Colby won that fight, which is why I like the judging the fight as a whole thing, and I like it primarily on damage. But this is the trouble with the 10-point must system, is that Usman could have got robbed. Like, it wouldn't have actually been out of the question on the 10-point must system.
That fight was not close. But on the scores, it was very fucking close.
See, and this is the trouble with this point system. It doesn't make it very obvious who won, and everyone knows who's won a fight. I mean, I know there are kind of some grey areas, but usually everyone looks at a fight and go, "I think I know who won that." But then you throw the fucking the judging system into it and the point system, and everyone's like, "Oh, I think they won this many out of this many." And
what do you guys think about what Glory does? Now, I don't know, so we'll get to it, but I don't know if you actually get to see the scores, if the fighters get to see the scores, but Glory essentially will show each round that gets scored, they will show it on the screen.
On the screen. It's like the amateur boxing, the old school amateur boxing, where you know if you're up or down going into the round.
Yeah. Yeah, but I don't know if the fighters actually see that in Glory. I can't remember.
Well,
but let's assume they do.
If they're gonna put it up on the screen, if I was them, I'd have someone in the corner have a check of it and be able to shout it out to them between in the rounds.
Does that make it more exciting?
That absolutely does not make it more exciting, because if you're talking about people being worried that people are going to coast because they're winning fights, if you know that you're fucking winning the fight, that is going to compound the issue horribly.
Yeah.
Right. That's the trouble.
But then is there a possibility? I mean, you could, like, to play the devil's advocate, then the other person knows that they're severely losing the fight, so they'll be trying to attack more.
They normally know they're losing anyway.
Yeah, I mean, if you're severely losing a fight, you've lost the fight for that long anyway. Like, you know, you've got to go and be reckless or just not get knocked out. Like, that's apparent. It's way more prevalent when, like, the Colby Covington fight, if it was 2-2 going into the last round, and you're like, you've actually stole 2 rounds here. Like, you just need to nick one more round and you've won the fight. Like, that's when it comes into kind of tactical and using things like that. But I don't think it's ever going to play into the hands of, I need to knock somebody out here. You can always kind of tell when you need to.
Yeah, and I think looking at Rodriguez versus Holloway, that was only, what was that, a week ago, came into the final round and they went, "You're probably not winning. You got to go and knock him out."
Yeah, no, the coach was
Fuck the game plan.
Yeah, the coach literally said, like, "Let's go crazy. Like, do whatever you need to do. Like, just go haywire."
Yeah, but you know what? I reckon Holloway went into that and was keen to win that final round. But you know what, actually, considering some of the stupid stuff that Holloway does, like the whole pointing at the floor and asking to bang, considering he does that, he probably wouldn't have coasted the final round. But another man might have seen, if given those points between the rounds, might have seen that and gone, "I'm going to play this safe as fuck."
I feel like Usman could be that kind of guy.
Yeah.
I feel like lots of people could have. You know, it's kind of weird how much everyone loves GSP now, because he would have been a prime candidate for doing that kind of shit, because he saw it as a sport and he won rounds as a sport.
And I reckon Jones as well, actually. So
it's not a bad thing. It's
Yeah.
In a world of margins where if you win or lose it by a very small amount, the amount you get paid is significantly more or less. Of course you'd do it. You'd have to. The other thing as well is if you're up and you're like going into the last round and you're not hurt, just take a win. I think it'd be fine. I don't think they should see the scores. I don't like the idea of them seeing the scores.
Yeah,
I think
it is kind of weird.
It's like I like the thing of when there's a fight happening, it's in the cage, it's these two guys, they're having a scrap, then they get to the end, they shake each other's hand and they get the result. I don't like the idea of like the external factors coming in and being like, you're up 2-1 or you're down 2 rounds or whatever. It's kind of leave that out of the cage.
Not the same, but it starts looking maybe a little bit like the Thai with betting and stuff, isn't it?
Well, back in the day
not
with
quite the
amateur
same, but-
boxing, you used to have to press buttons, right? So you'd have a red button and a green button, and if somebody hit a good punch, you'd press the button, and then if there's a consensus between the judges, you'd get a point. And I remember watching boxing fights in the Olympics where somebody would jab, hit them, and they wouldn't get the point, and they'd be screaming in the ring, "That was a point! That was a point!" Like,
yeah.
you don't want
fucking
that.
weird.
You don't want that.
Yeah, and you don't. I don't think we should have a point system judged on like number of hits because.
Oh no, I'm not saying that. Though.
No, I'm not saying you are, but I think we should make it clear that that is a terrible way to do it because. How many times have you looked at the fight stats afterwards and it's like, oh, this person got this many significant strikes and that person got that many? But you're like, yeah, but how significant were they really?
Yeah.
I mean,
it's like when I played the UFC game, just spam jab.
Yeah. Yeah, and you win the fight.
Yeah.
but you know, you could look at the Yair and Holloway fight, and you could like look at the leg kicks, right? You could look at, oh my god, Holloway ate so many leg kicks, but like he just fucking didn't do anything. Like didn't phase him. He was just like, yeah, I'll take him.
Yeah. Is that damage?
Yeah. So question is, if it's I guess damage is then if he was actually limping and unable to.
So if you can mask it. So Holloway, clearly his leg was sore, but he didn't show it. Dana White said he's walking around the back absolutely fine. So is that actual damage? I get a black eye, right? If you're super pale and you get hit, you go red really quick. It might not hurt, but that looks worse. So are we discriminating against ginger people with the word damage?
The judges can only judge what they can see. Yeah, maybe we are discriminating against pale people, but you know, I'm gonna shy away from saying that. Yeah, having an MRI scan quickly after you've had a fight to judge the actual amount of soft tissue damage you've got might make it a lot less spectator friendly. If that's actually what we all agree is the most important thing, is that people watching the sport know what the hell's going on, making them undergo a medical evaluation afterwards is not the way to do that.
Can you imagine? We're just all waiting for like a day after the fight to find out who won.
Are you just waiting for the MRI to finish? Everybody watches it. Just
you watch the person coming in.
To actually bring it back to like the real point I was trying to make was, are you saying before that you commended damage being like the clear thing that they're chasing? Just damage on its own is really hard to score as well because there's no real definition of the word damage. It's again open to interpretation. It's still quite difficult to score, but damage feels fine for all of us. We feel like we understand what we mean when we say damage, but it's still open massively to interpretation.
Yeah, I do take your point. And I mean, some fights it would be kind of hard to work out. I mean, some fights people get dropped, but the other guy is bloodied and beaten. So it's kind of hard to work those out. But I think it's not so much that I like damage. It's more that it seems better to me than like who got closer to finishing the fight. Because if you're judging on who got close to finishing the fight, we just to check, do we agree that Leon Edwards, you know, beat Nate Diaz in that last fight?
Yeah.
Who got closer to being finished?
No, it's true. And how much do you skew that to the score? Like how much does that have an impact of 4.5 rounds of dominating? Like where's the line?
So question is, maybe if that fight was had in ONE FC, would they have scored it differently? Because actually it's a near knockout or submission being scored first, then damage. So
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, they would have scored it differently. And actually,
they may have scored it differently. I still don't think. I don't think they throw away the 4.5 rounds that Leon dominated.
Well, yes and no, but I mean, if they do, then it's not in line with the scoring practice that they say, because the scoring practice they say is primary thing is close to finishing. Also, we score the fight as a whole, not round by round. By that reasoning, Nate Diaz won that fight. And actually, you know what? I mean, if you are clear at the start that that's how you're going to judge the fight, not mad about that. At least then it's quite obvious for the people watching who's scored or not. I don't agree with that system, but I wouldn't be super mad about it in that particular instance because Leon was this close to going out.
And the rules are transparent. Like you both know that's the rule.
I think, yeah, I mean, I think we can all agree the important points are the rules are transparent, people stick to the rule, the judges stick to the scoring system, and it's obvious. I think the main difficulty is making it obvious for people watching at home to know who's what, right? But I like the damage system. I'm just not sure I like the rounds system because it means that people can just do a tiny bit more damage twice and then take an absolute beating and still win the fight.
So here's something I'd quite like to see, and it's never going to happen because they don't get paid enough. Judges don't just score and then disappear. If judges had to do like a write-up afterwards, or I don't know, like an interview or whatever, just to justify their decisions, they could have like a little dictaphone next to them that they talk into. Because there's a lot of scoring that happens where you go, how the fuck have they scored it that way? But they've seen something that they've scored it that way. And people complain about judges and they go, yada, 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 yada. I think if there was something you could do to increase the transparency as to why a judge has scored that round 10-9 for that person, you're actually going to get less chaos because people are kicking off going, this judge is shit, they shouldn't be allowed to judge. If they had to write down, I scored that round for Leon because he threw more kicks, he landed more kicks, and he was better at wrestling. Not a lot, but...
Yeah, they don't get an opportunity to explain their reasoning.
Mm-hmm. And I think there's something around that because you've scored it that way for a reason. And I like to think the judge's integrity is intact and they're scoring the fight on what they've saw rather than they prefer this person to this person. But that's corruption, and I'm not getting into that. But if the judges have integrity and they're scoring the fight properly, they have a reason for scoring it that way. We should be able to see that.
It would be nice to have a sort of review ability of it, and what would be nice is if there was a system whereby people came back to review the rules, which I guess is the problem of not having a universal governing body. And MMA probably never will, and Ju-Jitsu probably never will either. But at least with a universal governing body, they can at least, I don't know, meet every 2 years and be like, hey guys, this bit's going a bit wrong, probably ought to have a think about this.
Yeah,
that would be really
this
great.
Judge keeps fucking up.
Bin.
But it'd be nice to have like a repercussion to being bad at it as well.
Yeah, that'd be good. And a proper review process would be great. That would be getting into completely revamping the structure of MMA governorship and how it's organized. But that would be good.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of getting to the point where we're kind of saying there needs to be some kind of categories and then they need to be well defined and people need to understand them. The point around transparency, I think, is good. Just tangent, I want to bring something up as well. And we know we've not got onto it, so this is going to come left of field. I think we should bring back yellow cards.
Explain the yellow card system.
So in Pride, it was for like stalling. So if you're stalling, you got a yellow card. But I think at the minute, I think the way we judge fights in terms of eye pokes, in terms of groin strikes, in terms of things that you shouldn't do, it's really open to interpretation. Some judges are really quick. Some referees are really quick to take a point. Some aren't. I think by having the yellow card and having clear, defined rules around that yellow card, and it's not the Pride way where like they take 10% of the pay off them for stalling. Like, not interested in that. But if it's like a yellow card with a defined set of rules of you get one poke in the eye, do it again, you get a yellow card, you get a point taken off. I think that would make the sport better because at the minute it's way too just random.
It really does depend on which referee you get at any given
100%.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's coming back to our whole thing that we did a little while ago about how communication is the most important thing. It's probably still the same thing here, just communicating very clearly what the rules are. I don't mind if the rules change, so long as everyone's on the same page.
Yeah.
But yes, that would be nice because at the moment that's too loose.
Yeah, because you know there are fighters in the back who see a ref's name come up and go, oh, for fuck's sake, I'm not going to get anything today. Like, know if somebody gets poked in the eye and it's a certain ref, nothing's going to happen. I think just having that clearly defined, it's not going to fix the judging, and I know we're talking about judging, but I think it'd fix a part of the sport that leads to the judging in the end.
Yeah. Cool.
Fixed it.
Cool. All right. All right. Well, yeah, let's wrap it up there. Then we came to no conclusions. We haven't got a good rule system, and everyone's still confused about it. But at least we've explained a few different bits. Yeah, combat thoughts has not changed. We've solved nothing and come to no real conclusions. But there are nice ways to score it, like you got like closeness to finishing, damage, and whether it's the fight as a whole or round by round. Yeah, that's it. There's lots of questions and no answers.
We hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please consider subscribing to the podcast and checking us out on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram under the name Combat Thoughts. We'll see you next time.